I'm not ashamed.
What was Pharaoh's compromise with Moses in order that the plague of flies be removed? This is the question that we seek to answer today as we continue our verse-by-verse study of the book of Exodus on walking through the Bible.
The glory of his cross.
If you have a Bible with you, you can turn to Exodus chapter 8. We're going to be reading from verses 25 to 32. If you don't have a Bible, don't worry. Just follow along with us on the screen. The version that we'll be reading from is the New King James Version. So, Exodus chapter 8, beginning at verse 25. Then Pharaoh called for Moses and Aaron and said, "Go sacrifice to God in the land." And Moses said, "It is not right that we do so, for we would be sacrificing the abomination of the Egyptians to the Lord our God. If we sacrifice the abomination of the Egyptians before their eyes, then will they not stone us? We will go 3 days' journey into the wilderness and sacrifice to the Lord our God as he will command us." So Pharaoh said, "I will let you go that you may sacrifice to the Lord your God in the wilderness. Only you shall not go very far away. Intercede for me." Then Moses said, "Indeed, I am going out from you, and I will entreat the Lord that the swarms of flies may depart tomorrow from Pharaoh, from his servants, and from his people. But let Pharaoh not deal deceitfully any more in not letting the people go to sacrifice to the Lord." So Moses went out from Pharaoh and entreated the Lord. And the Lord did according to the word of Moses. He removed the flies from Pharaoh, from his servants, and from his people. Not one remained. But Pharaoh hardened his heart at this time also. Neither would he let the people go. In chapters 7 and 8, we've been dealing with the plagues that God inflicted on Egypt. God is not being vindictive here, for the plagues were only used because Pharaoh's rebellion against the word of the Lord. However, since God had to use these plagues, it was going to be known in Egypt and in the surrounding nations that he is the only true God of this universe. The first plague that he sent upon Egypt was turning the water in the Nile River into blood. This polluted their drinking water, and we discussed in that episode that the water was literally turned into blood. It wasn't simply turned red. Pharaoh didn't let the people go after that plague. Then God brought forth an overabundance of frogs from the Nile. This again was a miracle. Not that God brought forth frogs from the Nile, but that he did so in such great numbers. Pharaoh still didn't let the people go. Then God brought on a plague of lice, which we discussed was likely ticks. These ticks infested both man and beast. Pharaoh still did not let the people go. Then in our last episode, God brought upon Egypt a plague of flies, which we discussed were dog flies or stable flies, flies that would suck the blood of those that it landed on. This would, of course, not only be an annoyance, but it would create the opportunity for disease to spread. This plague occurred over all of Egypt, except in Goshen, where the children of Israel were. In today's reading, we have Pharaoh coming to Moses and Aaron. Thus far, after each plague is removed, he has been unwilling to let the children of Israel go. During the plague of the frogs, he promised to let them go to sacrifice to God if the frogs were removed, only to renege on that promise once the frogs were removed. This time, he tells Israel that they can't leave to go sacrifice to the Lord, but they could do so in the land. This was a compromise on Pharaoh's part, for up to that point, he had not allowed them to do so, viewing such a demand as showing that the children of Israel had too much time on their hands. Moses, though, told Pharaoh that it was not right for the children of Israel to do so because they would be sacrificing the abomination of the Egyptians, and doing so risk stoning on the part of the Egyptians. What was this abomination that would cause such a reaction? Well, first off, the Egyptians worshipped many animals, including the cow or the bull. These animals were thus sacred and were not sacrificed at all. Add to that the sacrifices would not be sacrificed according to the rigid regulations observed by the Egyptians regarding the cleanliness of animal sacrifices, and you had a recipe of stirring up trouble. Moses said that they would go 3 days' journey into the wilderness to sacrifice to the Lord as was commanded. Moses returned to the original command, as that was where Pharaoh was at the time. God's intention was still to demand the full release of Israel. But if Pharaoh would allow this, full release would then be placed on the table. The reason again that they were to travel 3 days' journey into the wilderness was to be away from Egyptian interference. Pharaoh countered that proposal, stating that he would not let the children of Israel go 3 days' journey into the wilderness to sacrifice to the Lord, but they could go into the wilderness, just not that far, as he did not want any opportunity given to them to flee permanently. Pharaoh knew what Moses' overall intentions were, and he was not going to allow them to go to a place where he couldn't stop them with his armies. With this being his proposal, Pharaoh asked Moses to intercede with the Lord for him to remove the plague of flies. Moses agreed to intercede with the Lord for Pharaoh, but he warned Pharaoh not to deal deceitfully with Israel as he had done in the past. In other words, Moses was telling Pharaoh to keep his word. Moses prayed to the Lord for him to remove the flies, which he did do so the next day. Not one fly remained. However, once the flies were gone, Pharaoh again hardened his heart, not wanting to give up this free labor. We'll see what happens to Pharaoh when we pick up with chapter 9. With that, our time is up for today. Lord willing, we hope you'll join us for tomorrow's discussion of Exodus chapter 9, verses 1 to 7, as we continue our walk through the Bible, one verse at a time.
I'm not ashamed.
Thank you for watching today's episode. We hope that you found it edifying and ask that you not only subscribe to our channel and podcast, but that you like and share this episode among your friends, so that the saving gospel of Jesus Christ can go out to the whole world.
Of his cross.